Hello and welcome to Honest Faith Conversations. As always, I am your co-host, Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today let's talk about Shimmer Lake.
So for those of you that don't know, Shimmer Lake is a Netflix original movie. And it stars a lot of famous faces, a lot of comedic faces, actually. So you have Rainn Wilson, who most famously played Dwight from The Office. You have Ed Helms, who was on The Daily Show and also of Hot Tub Time Machine fame.
Oh, geez, don't mention that again. It's such a bad movie.
Yeah. A lot of other comedic actors that you'll go, oh, yeah, I recognize them, especially if you watch that episode of Black Mirror that we last talked about.
Yep.
He is in this episode, or in this movie as well.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and so we want to do a spoiler alert, obviously, if you haven't watched it. I know it just came out on Netflix, so some of you may have not watched it yet, but I'd go watch it first. It's not a very long movie. Go watch it.
It's only about an hour and a half.
Yeah, so go watch it and then come back and listen to us so we can have a discussion.
There we go. So, really quickly, my summary and review of the movie. The summary of the movie, without giving it too much away, is a non-linear narrative talking about the aftermath of a bank heist. And my review is that it was actually pretty good for I'm going to say for a Netflix original. There are a lot of Netflix original movies that are just awful. Mm-hmm. But this one, I was actually pleasantly surprised. It had a good narrative that you were invested in, and you wanted to get to the bottom of the story.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I would agree with that, but I would also say, like, the first episode, like when you see Friday, I think it's Friday, whatever the first day is. But anyway, the first couple of minutes, like I wasn't really into it. Like I was like, okay, I had no idea what's going on. Like I couldn't really put the pieces together until I finally realized, oh, we're going back in time. Now it makes more sense. So it did take me a little bit longer to get into it, but when I was into it, I was hooked.
All right, and so what about your summary? Do you have anything to add to my summary, or do you want to attempt?
It's always hard for me to do summaries for things that are non-linear, because I have to think about things like going forward in time when in the movie it was kind of going backwards. So I won't add anything besides, people turn out to be not the type of people that you thought they were. Like, the crooks aren't really the real crooks, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way.
Yeah.
That negates some of the twist, though. So hopefully you did not listen to this part before heeding our spoiler warning.
I know. I already told them the spoiler alert. So if they listen past that part, it's their own fault.
Okay. So, the movie brings two things to mind. The first thing is a topic that kind of related to the movie, and for those of you that have watched the entire movie all the way through, you know that at the end, and here's the big spoiler alert, at the end you find out that the sheriff that you've been rooting for the entire time was kind of like the mastermind behind this with the one criminal's wife. You'll find out why in the movie, and for those of you that have watched the movie, then you know why. And...
Well, we have to tell why, because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Okay, so the sheriff and the woman, I can't remember her name now. For the life of me.
Steph.
Yes, Stephanie. Yep. Yeah. So they had a child together. However, her husband was under the impression that the child was his. So, her husband, we're not entirely sure, how this happened, but she blames her husband for her child's death. Mm-hmm. And so, he goes to court. He does go to prison. However, he's not convicted of murder.
Yeah, he has got a manslaughter charge, and there was a lot to do with... It was a meth lab that blew up, and it was a meth lab in their house, and it killed her son because he came home from school sick one day, and so that's kind of the backstory of that. Was the sheriff's son, not the criminal's son, not her husband's son, and so that's why the sheriff and the wife kind of
teamed up.
And this was all based around a system that didn't work in the way that it's supposed to bring about justice. This brings
very
up
real world.
Yeah. And I mean, this kind of ties in a bit with what we talked about last week with Get Out. Since Get Out is all about the systems that are in place, kind of fighting against the system kind of thing. And so it brought up the idea of, are vigilantes ever justified in what they are doing? And so we thought a lot about this. We thought, there are, vigilantes across the country, and there is a wonderful book by John Ronson. I think it's called Them. Is that the one where he goes and talks to different groups of people? I think it's Them. But it's not the one where it's not the psychopath test, so it is Them, because he talks to different groups of people, and one of the groups that he talks to is vigilantes, and he talks to a couple of completely different groups. He goes to this group in Seattle, and they're actually going out. They're doing good things.
Are they Seattle?
I think it's Seattle, where they go out and they do good things. They actually help the homeless. They report things to the police.
Mm-hmm. They're more there to observe. They're like a glorified neighborhood watch, essentially.
And you also have where they're not like those playing at being superheroes, like in Kick-Ass 2.
Yeah.
You have also the group in New York City, and this group of vigilantes in New York City, they all have assault rifles, fully decked out in their riot gear, and where he said that he felt most terrified with them, than he did with the other people.
Yeah, because they they're essentially looking for
to start a fight.
Yeah, they're looking for a reason to harm somebody, which is a terribly dangerous mindset. If you are in the business to protect people, but part of the reason why you're doing that is looking for an excuse to harm somebody else, another individual, another human being, that is not justified. That is not a good thing.
Yeah, and I've never really run into any of these groups. I've lived in a couple of big cities in my life, and I've never really run into seeing any of these vigilante groups or seeing the things that they've done. And you may have a different experience, listener, that I have not had, but I really don't see that they're doing very much to combat crime in some of the bigger cities. Mm-mm. And so, are they doing more harm than good is kind of the big question. And I mean, this is something that so many superhero movies have tried to ask this question. Do the vigilantes do more harm than good? In fact, there are major plot lines in some of the big superhero movies. And so this, speaking of this, it brings about the Batman. Not like the old... rest in peace, Adam West, as of yesterday, if you had not heard. But I'm talking about the Christopher Nolan one, the Batman Begins, the I'm Batman voice one, which today, because I have allergies, I have a little gruffer voice, so it fits. But it has that question of, what about vigilantes who erupt from a system that is in a desperate time, that has such corrupt systems that you need somebody who is outside the law to reform the laws and the system, which is kind of what Batman's story was originally. He was born out of the system where it's corrupt, and so he needed to step outside of those laws and everything else to kind of get his own, to get justice for the whole system.
Here's my thing with Batman, though. Like, he's the richest man in Gotham.
Yep.
He has so much money. Why isn't he putting his money to actually help the people whose job it is to actually, like, get corruption out of the system? Like, he knows it exists. Like, why doesn't he, like, publicly combat it? If he has all this money, he can protect himself. Why can't he just, like, stand up and say, I see this corruption, I know what's going on, we need to fix this now?
Well, and there are some storylines where that happens. Is the Telltale Batman series. That's kind of what that's about, is taking that storyline of electing Harvey Dent to become this politician who is going to fight against the corruption within the systems. And you have that in The Dark Knight, the same kind of storyline where electing Harvey Dent as the district attorney to kind of combat this corruption.
But I'm saying, like, why does he have to hide always behind Batman?
Yeah, and so that's the question. Is it justified then?
I don't think so. I think he could do better things. Like, whatever. Like, he can still do, like, the Batman stuff behind the scenes, but I think the whole, like, Playboy persona that he puts on for the public is
the billionaire Playboy philanthropist.
Yes, I just think it's just not. It's not good. At least Tony Stark, like, people know that he is Iron Man. You know what I mean?
This is a Marvel versus DC
okay,
issue.
Sorry.
They're they're pretty much the same.
We won't go into that. But anyway, we are a divided house over here. So.
Well, it brings about the thought experiment, then, asking this question, are vigilantes ever justified in what they do? Is the whole bread thought experiment, where a man steals a loaf of bread, and doesn't have to be a man, I'm sorry, but that's what the classic thought experiment is, but a man steals a loaf of bread to feed his family when there is no other option available to him. Is he justified in doing that? And, I mean, we've got stories kind of based around this. You have Les Mis, which is kind of based around that, with Jean Valjean. That's why he's in prison, is he stole a loaf of bread.
He stole a loaf of bread. One thing led to another. French Revolution.
You have so many stories that are around this thought experiment. And, you know, it's kind of like, well, then a vigilante would not... You know, how do they know the difference? And the police are supposed to know the difference between what is right and what is wrong, what has the nuance there.
But unfortunately, the police can be as criminals sometimes as the criminals.
Well, yeah, exactly. And this is what this movie is kind of going to show, is that the sheriff is kind of the mastermind, is behind this whole thing. And so I'm pretty sure, even though you don't really see the complete denouement from the movie, the climax is the very beginning, well, which is the very end, because it's a nonlinear storytelling. Yeah. But the entire movie is kind of the denouement. But the crux of the matter is you don't see what happens after it's all of their justice comes to an end. Mm-hmm. Where it's their own form of justice, their own kind of idea of what justice looks like. Now, that's a bigger topic, I think, is that what does justice look like?
Yeah, like we could talk we can also too talk about like going back to like the vigilante. Like, I wish we could talk about Robin Hood, because like in my mind, like he would have been the only maybe vigilante who would have been like totally, like, okay in what he was doing. Yeah.
Well, you also have the totalitarian thought experiment of the trolley car. Of, would you, if you had access to the switch of a trolley car, and you saw that the trolley car was headed for this break where either one person was going to be killed or a group of people were going to be killed, how would you make that choice, kind of thing? Is that would you sacrifice the one for the good of the many? And so I think that real life is not totalitarianism. I don't think it's as cut and dry and black and white as even some of these vigilante stories, and even the bread thought experiment is that, life is life is messy. Life is gray, and we live in this weird tension between the two. And I love how Kimmy Schmidt, we brought this up before, but the Kimmy Schmidt, this last season, season 3, where she just sacrifices herself in essence to get rid of the whole problem, is that I'm going to make the sacrifice, not somebody else. And so, I think that's very much how it is. Is it about your own personal self-sacrifice, and what does it look for justice? And so that'll bring us into our next topic of forgiveness. But I wanted to talk about first about the church's place in justice. If you belong to the Episcopal Church, and I'm not sure if this is solely an Episcopal thing, but our baptismal covenant in the Episcopal Church, and this can be found in the Book of Common Prayer for the Episcopal Church, but in our baptismal covenant, there is one last line. This is my favorite line in the entire baptismal covenant. But this is the last line. It asks, "Will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being?" Which the response is, "I will, with God's help." And it's my favorite line because it, in essence, is charging the entire church with the responsibility of justice and peace and respect and dignity for all human beings, which I really think is the job of the church. Is, if our job is to care for the spirituality of every human being, is that you really don't think about your spiritual life if you're not in a good place emotionally. Is that you need help to get there, and so many people have those stresses of poverty, of finding work, of seeking justice for themselves, and all these other things that encumber them. That I think that the church's job, in essence, should be about justice, and about not just justice in the legal system, but social justice across the boards. Is making sure that all things are equal for everybody, that all opportunities are equal for everybody. That, not saying that everyone is equal, because we're not. We all have different gifts and abilities, but that if we want to try to do something else, that we have the opportunity to try something else, rather than I wasn't born this way, so I can't have that opportunity.
Well, and you also have to be really careful about what you consider to be justice. Because sometimes you come into those circumstances where both parties are kind of at fault. Both sides are not, it's not a clear, this person is the good person, this person is the bad person.
Exactly.
For example, in Shimmer Lake, that's the case. He should not have had a meth house. He should he should not have been doing that, especially with the child in the house.
He should not have been Breaking Bad.
No, he should not have been. But then also on her side, she didn't stop it. She could have gone and picked up the son.
Yeah.
She could have taken him home. She could have decided to forgive her ex-husband for doing this. She could have done so many other different things that would have made us see her in a better light, but she instead chooses the revenge route, which then it turns the tables, and now she's the bad guy.
Yeah, and I think that they're all guilty of something in this movie, and that's the funny thing that is brought up in the movie, is that a child asks the sheriff is he's talking about the town being so dirty, and then she says, "Well, when I'm dirty, my mom gives me a bath," and then he says, "That's what I'm doing. I'm giving the town a bath." And in essence, I don't think that's what he's doing. He's being a vigilante in that sense, even though he is the law, not in the Judge Dredd sort of way, but he is more, the sheriff. He has more
authority.
Yeah. And, even though their son was born about through a bad circumstance, through something that really shouldn't have happened, that, he should have, there's still chances for him to forgive. And that brings about our next topic, which is forgiveness. Is that revenge versus forgiveness? And this is one of the things that I heard a while ago was that forgiveness is giving up your right to revenge. Forgiveness is actually wishing well to somebody else. Is that letting go of whatever it is. And, we've printed off in actual like handwriting print off, but not actually printing.
I wrote
like
it.
The not really
that's
cares.
called writing.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why it kind of suddenly irked my brain that I said the word, but is that, asking yourself, would it be right for me to do this? Would it be right for me to in the movie, is it take their lives because they took my son's life, or they were party to this taking my son's life and getting the husband off with only 8 months of prison time, which, no, all of the townspeople were guilty, of something or another. And, that's why, in the gospel, you hear when Jesus is saying that, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, is that that you're supposed to forgive your neighbor and keep forgiving them. And that's, the disciples coming to him and asking him, well, how many times am I supposed to forgive my neighbor? And he's like, 7? He's like, no, not 7, but 70 times 7. Is that, you keep on forgiving. You keep letting it go because, and one of the quotes that I pulled up here, which I really loved, was that, was about talking, it was basically letting yourself off the hook. And I think that forgiveness is about letting yourself off the hook. That, and here's the quote that I got from C.R. Strahan, is, forgiveness has nothing to do with absolving a criminal of his crime. It has everything to do with relieving oneself of the burden of being a victim, letting go of the pain, and transforming oneself from victim to survivor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can totally see that. Which I think is why, and then I pulled up this quote, too, from Nelson Mandela. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That's why it's such a powerful weapon. We don't really see that, very much as forgiveness being a weapon. We see more as forgiveness being the more peaceful resolution. However, when I can see what he's saying here, because sometimes when somebody does you harm with the intent to do you harm, because, for some reason they're just, jerks and they, are like that. But anyway, but when you forgive them from doing that harm, it makes what they did to you not as bad as they wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So it's like, sure, you can do me harm, but I'm going to put up this shield called forgiveness. And so it's not going to hurt me as much as you think it's going to.
Yeah, and in essence, it is more or less, well, it's letting yourself off the hook, but it's also not forgetting what somebody has done to you. Is that we have all suffered some trauma or another that we don't want to forget, because we know what would happen if we let that person do whatever it is again.
Well, and that's what made us who we are today.
Yeah. So
we can't forget it.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you can not forget it. You can remember something and keep a defense for those things and still forgive somebody. Mm-hmm. Is still, kind of wishing a person well and letting go of what they did, but also not letting them do it to you again, kind of thing is one of those instances. And I think that we'll get to that here in a second about what the church do. So we'll hold off on that. But is that. Here's another one that you put down here, is that forgiveness is the sweetest revenge, from Isaac Friedman.
Well, I did a lot of research on the internet, and that's the only name that came up with that quote. So I'm not entirely sure if it was really.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. Anyway.
Allegedly, he said this. And so I think that so often people will confuse the two, is that forgiveness is not forgetting. here's a bad example, but it's the only one that's coming to mind. Our current president of this country has done some pretty bad stuff. And, people, there are a lot of Christians who are saying, oh, we just need to forgive him. We just need to let it go. And that's the thing about letting things go, is that it's not the full part of forgiveness. The full of forgiveness is letting letting yourself off the hook for that thing, but also fighting for justice in the moment of it, is not letting that person do it again.
Well, and that's the thing, like, I can't, especially for the sexual allegations put against Trump about the things that he has done in the past. And I have to say allegations because, unfortunately, he hasn't been convicted of anything yet. But, like, it's not, I don't see it's up to me to forgive him for that. Because I'm not the one he did that to.
Yeah.
But also because I know of the possibility of him doing harm to me, like, because he's done it to other people, like, I would not feel comfortable being in a room alone with him.
I wouldn't let you be in a room alone.
I would not feel comfortable.
I wouldn't feel comfortable alone in a room with him.
Even sitting next to him, like, I just would not, like, I would not be. I mean, I know I'm not, like, a supermodel or anything like that, and, that's who he goes for, but, like, there's still that possibility, and I just can't.
I was going to make a bad joke, but I decided not to.
Good.
So this next quote really kind of gets to the crux of what I'm saying, is that this one is allegedly from Alexander Pope. To err is human, to forgive is divine, which, by the way, is not in the Bible. So, but this is something that I want to say, is that the church's role should be about forgiveness, and this is exactly fits into that justice thing, is that we are to forgive people, and this is what the whole of society is. They don't like Christians because of the silly things that we do. Is that we're not fighting for justice, and that's the reason why we're not liked. Is that so many people take offense at that and feel like that we need to defend ourselves against all of this rhetoric that is anti-Christian or whatever, and it's a war on Christmas or whatever.
Or Sharia law for some reason. Like, I don't understand, like, people are so concerned about that, but anyway.
No, instead of Sharia law, we're having this weird Western gospel law, which is just as bad, if you ask me. And the thing is, we have forgotten what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness is like just letting those things kind of water off of our backs. Is in a sense letting it go, is kind of brushing it off, but also not forgetting it. Is that not letting people do it again? And the way that we talked about this a little bit last week, the way that we do that is by asking them, is saying, hey, you know what? Why? What did I do? Let's figure this out. Let's try to be better about it. And I think this has so much to do with forgiveness that not every guilty party is going to do that. But,
yeah, I was about to say, like, that's more like day-to-day stuff, but, like,
yeah.
Obviously we're not talking about, like, if somebody, like, murders your family, like, okay, we're just going to forgive you and let you live your life. Like, clearly, like, I feel like the justice system at that point in time should get involved, but also the justice system is not really focused on justice.
It's deeply flawed.
Yeah. And
there is a wonderful, wonderful episode by The Hidden Brain that came out this week called The Air We Breathe, The Air We Breathe. And it's talking all about our kind of implicit bias, which it's fantastic. It's a great follow-up to last week's episode on Get Out. So I just want to throw that out there. But, with the church and the forgiveness, and this is kind of what I'm getting at with this, is that fighting for justice in those moments is about that forgiveness, is about saying that my wants and my needs don't matter. In fact, what happens then is, like with the Amish, with a few years ago, with that shooting that happened in the Amish community, was that they came back and they forgave that family. Because I think that guy took his own life or whatever. They came to the family and said, what can we do for you? And that is radical forgiveness. That is justice right there.
I mean, because they knew, too, that, like, yes, we're hurting, but you have to be hurting, too. Because somebody that you love did something horrific and
took their own life.
And if something were to, if somebody like that in my community turned around and did something terrible and then took their own life, like, it would be hard on me. Like, it would be hard to process. So the fact that they recognized that and stepped up and actually, like, went to the family and,
forgave them.
Yeah.
Well, and there's stories like this across the boards. There is a story about a family in Florida that forgave their son-in-law who shot their daughter in a fit of rage in one of their arguments in a marital spat that they're working with him to get justice, to get him out of prison. That, this is what Jesus looks like to me, is that's what God looks like. That's forgiveness, and that's justice, and that is being redemptive. Not letting somebody rot and locking somebody away, taking somebody's life away from them. That's not justice. That's just, hiding the problem.
And that's why
letting it fester.
And that's why I don't like the death penalty, because it's just not a very good form of forgiveness. It's not forgiveness.
Yeah. And this brings about, where we should go from here. Formerly our controversial issues segment. But what should we do with this stuff? And I think the very first thing is that we need to fight for justice. We need to fight for justice and peace in our society. Is that we, especially we as Episcopalians who took vows to this when we were confirmed in the Episcopal Church, we took a vow saying that, yes, we will fight for justice and peace and the respect and dignity of all human beings. And that looks like stepping up to the plate in those court cases when something like this is coming up, is standing up for not only the victim but also the accused, is fighting for making sure that the redemptive justice takes place. And I know that it hurts. It hurts to say, it hurts to...
And it feels unfair.
It does seem unfair. And that's what the wonderful thing about grace is. That's what the gospel news was that, God loves us. So, none of this stuff matters.
Well, and it's really like, especially in this political climate, it reminds me of, what Michelle Obama said, they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
Really, though, that is forgiveness to me almost. Like, they're going to, like, hit us with the low blows. They are going to treat us like dirt, but we are going to see their humanity. Like, we are going to see that they are our brothers and sisters, and we should still treat them with respect, even though they do not return the same. But, I mean, this is not a quid pro quo. Like, it's not, you scratch my back, I scratch your back.
Yeah.
That's just not what the faith is supposed to be about.
Well, and that begs the question, what are we to do with those dangerous people, with those who are like Ted Bundy or Charles Manson, who, we know that if they were let loose that they would go about killing again. And I think that's the thing, is that we need to find the redemptive ways to redeem them, which for them, that's, I have no idea.
But almost,
I don't have no idea how that would work.
I would say that by locking them away, especially with Charles Manson, because I don't know if many listeners know, I'm sure you do, but at one point in time, he was on death row, but then California got rid of the death penalty, so now he's not. And that, was a big to-do. He was the main person that people were focused on when they got rid of the death penalty, because he did do horrific things. Like, the murders were awful. I would argue that we as a society were actually forgiving and thinking of him and putting him in a better place, because even though he is in jail, we are protecting him from himself.
Yeah.
Because he can do harm. So by keeping him in jail, I know that he's seen psychiatrists and psychologists, and I mean, he's one of those cases that
he's been studied.
Nothing is going to happen. Like, he's always going to be the way he is, unfortunately. So what are we to do then? The best thing to do in that circumstance is to keep him away from society, prevent him from doing further harm.
Exactly. And I think that's what we don't get, is that we think that even these non-violent criminals, these criminals who are guilty of these smaller things, and you have Jeff Sessions, who is calling for
the Keebler
harsher penalties for those who have committed drug crimes because of the opioid epidemic. But as we've seen in the past, and studies have shown that the war on drugs didn't work.
No, it did the exact opposite. Like, so many people are in jail, and unfortunately, once you're in jail or prison, it's so hard to break the cycle because you lose your job. Like, if you have to post bail, like, there's money down the tubes that you lost your savings.
And it goes back to the bread thought experiment, is that those people have no other option after they get out sometimes is but to go back into a life of crime, even if they didn't commit a crime in the first place. Yep. That's why recidivism rate is so high in this country. Yep. It's because we've got more people in prison than any other country per capita.
And unfortunately, we don't have very many programs to actually help them like reassimilate back to society. Because once employers find out that they've been to prison, they don't want to hire them. And they legally can say, nope, I don't want to hire you because you were in prison.
Yeah, and this brings us back to the movie, is that if the main character's wife, or main character's husband, rather, because she was more the main character than he was, but if Stephanie had gotten him into one of these rehabilitation programs, if he had been able to been rehabilitated, if he had been able to come to this place where he was redeemed and that, he could be a functioning member of society again, then, he wouldn't have had to rob a bank.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think this kind of was set up to get a vigilante form of justice. So, yeah. This brings us full circle down the movie.
Yep. Good job. We did a good job.
Yeah. All right. So, with that being said, we're going to wrap up here. So, we want your thoughts on this movie, on these topics of justice and forgiveness.
And I know that these are such, broad terms. Everybody has different ideas. So, if you don't agree with us, let us know. Give us feedback. If you like some of the stuff that we said, let us know. I mean, we don't worry about hurting our feelings.
Yeah. Anyway, you can leave a voicemail at 720-372-3879. That is our Google Voice number. And so we will, if we like your comment and we can use it and we can have a conversation with it, we will use it in a future broadcast if we get enough. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Real Honest Faith. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/realhonestfaith. You can also find us on our website, thehonestfaith.com. We're also on Tumblr and Reddit, and I think those
Did we say Twitter already?
Yes.
We'll say Twitter again.
Yeah, you can email us at honestfaithconvos@gmail.com. And you can also find our Patreon page and help support us, because we're still trying to raise money to build a newer computer that's going to be quieter and to build up our studio here a little bit so that we can get better microphones, better equipment, stuff like that.
Yeah.
A better publication for our podcast so that more people can come to listen to us and be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So anyway, with all of that being said, we just want to invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.